Hey, ladies, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to another self love conversation. My name is Gloria Ward and I am your host for this evening. Now, you ladies know that this month we are talking about human trafficking, and we have talked with some survivors. We have talked to people in law enforcement, and now we're going to talk to an organization that we have found in research called Fair Girls. And we're going to talk to Miss Tiffany Carty, who is the direct service manager there. And as a direct service manager, what do? You help the ladies.
It's a little bit of everything realistically. So in my role, I oversee all of the direct services that Fair Girls conducts, and I help guide and mentor our employees in various roles. So that encompasses policy advocacy, case management for adults, Hope Court case management for juveniles, street outreach, prevention education, the whole nine.
All right. And Tiffany, we interviewed a survivor maybe not too long ago. And hearing the stories is what is mind boggling because we also interviewed a private investigator. One of the things that we do not know is how involved and how this is a billion-dollar business with human trafficking, and what we think is human trafficking and how these women get recruited is really not it's really not what goes on. Can you just kind of explain to us what is the whole process in the psyche like? Why is it such a hot industry?
I think there's a lot of components that realistically feed into why it is such a successful industry. In that, when you look at, um, for lack of a better term, but just a lot of the fetish porn and the things that are becoming a lot deeper and darker, it is kind of feeding this desire or feeding this demand. And without a demand, there's no need to supply it, right?
Right.
And so you look at that, you look at the fact that we do live within rape culture, we do live within, these parameters that support to an extent gender based violence. And so when you see this demand, someone's going to supply it. It's going to happen. For the women that become involved, a lot of that has to do with vulnerability and their vulnerabilities being taken advantage of. Um, a predator knows what they are looking for and knows kind of the earmarks a lot of times of maybe previous trauma, homelessness, just various elements that would make someone vulnerable to exploitation, and they will feed on that.
And so, Tiffany, okay, so you guys help survivors, and when they come to you, the trauma behind it all, I just can't even imagine some of the things that you guys have seen. The Because when we were talking to a survivor, and here's my question, she really believed she was in a relationship with someone because he did all the stuff that a person in a relationship would do, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it switches.
Hmm.
The trauma behind that is devastating, first of all.
Absolutely.
The repair process to get these ladies to see that you can still have a healthy relationship, what is the actual percentage of that? Because if you do decide to get into another relationship with someone and they do the same thing, right? Because that's considered what a relationship is. How do you teach them that this is normal and this is not normal?
It takes a lot of time, realistically, and it takes a lot of commitment to the healing process. I would say foundationally, it really starts with learning when is an appropriate time to trust, what is an appropriate amount of trust, how to determine whether or not someone is worthy of that trust, because just because I'm dating someone doesn't mean they have crossed the threshold where they deserve that part of myself or that level of my trust. And so realistically, it starts with fostering a healthy view and a healthy perception of trust. But it does take quite the commitment, because there are quite a few triggers along the way. As you even mentioned, as you enter into these dating relationships again, is learning how to listen to your gut instincts. We have them for a reason, but it's really easy to use logic to reason them away. And so learning how to trust ourselves, learning what appropriate trust is, I mean, that's a process. It takes years of counseling and all sorts of self-love and self-care to get around that bend.
And Tiffany, the confusing part is if I go online and I find a date, right?
Yeah.
And I go out on this date and I say we hit it off and we have so much fun. We go out plenty of times, we go to the movies. Like the young lady we interviewed, I meet their family. I go out of town with them. We have so much fun. And then all of a sudden,
Hmm.
a switch happens.
Yeah. The switch is flipped, and everything that you thought is something else now. Yeah. It's pretty incredible.
That is scary. It's scary because if you think of a lot of single women,
Hmm.
these predators, you have to you have to be able to be doing something, and that's my question. What are they doing to prolong it this long for it to switch? Are they asking questions? Are they trying to figure out? They invest a lot of time. Is that true or no?
There's what we call a grooming process. And so it comes in typically in the beginning stages of that switch. you know there's this process, and it's very kind of almost insidious, where just little things are starting to slip in because it's changing where you set the bar. So,
Mm,
for example, where this person that I am dating, this person I think is my partner, may have been very supportive and encouraging of my career at the beginning of this dating experience, may now periodically be making very undercutting statements that attack who I am at the core of my being. But then it becomes, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. I was just having a bad day. And it's this gradual investment in tearing someone's self-esteem down. And when you come from a space where there's any background of trauma, any background of emotional, verbal, physical, sexual abuse, right? There's already damage to the self esteem that has taken place at some
that's
point in
most
their life.
women, though.
And
That's
it's like
most
taking
women.
that. Yeah. It's like taking that and exploiting that until, it's crazy to me that we can understand Stockholm syndrome in the
Right.
context of this bank robbery, or we can almost, even though we don't acknowledge it the way that we should, we can almost understand it in domestic violence. But a lot of times there's this disconnect when we start thinking about trafficking. But in the same way that we would cling to, a husband in a domestic violence situation, the same way we would bond with someone holding us hostage in a bank for 3 days, people bond to their trafficker. And that takes a very long time to break that bond and to heal from that bond. That's literally why, when you're working with this population, we refer to this type of trafficker as a Romeo pimp or a Romeo trafficker,
Oh, I
specifically
get it.
because of that development process. And while, that's not the only kind of trafficker, that's predominantly what we see in the United States.
Mhm.
The other kind that we see a lot here in the United States are the booster pimps, and those who those are the ones who will feed a substance or a drug addiction in order to have further power and control over that survivor, over that victim.
Wow. And it was stated that they do play on the vulnerable, the ones who had past traumas and everything. And
You know,
you
most
know,
traffickers can quote Maslow's hierarchy of needs better than psychologists can.
correct. And that's why I asked my questions earlier, because I'm saying you invest a lot of time where these young ladies stay for years. You have some girls who stay for 6 years, 13 years, and the whole time you're thinking, wow, these girls are being held against their will and they are out there where most of the time, when we speak with some survivors, they say, well, this is all I had. This person still made me feel a certain way, even though I was doing this. We had one survivor said that, you know, she wanted to be the main girl, and when she wasn't the main girl, he would purposely put another girl in the car in the front seat and make her go to the back to mess with her self-esteem, because she really wanted to be in the front. The queen sat in the front. That's where, things were. So she, even though she knew what she was doing, she wanted to be in that front seat,
Right.
you know. And one of the things that blew my mind also is that families are involved. There was one, the private investigator, that said the kids are going to school recruiting.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a family aspect of it, and to be quite frank, if there were not families involved in this industry, we wouldn't have a need for the program we have in Hope Court, where we help divert juveniles into, a trauma informed care setting instead of having them in the regular juvenile justice system. It's pretty intense at times, but you've got to think in the same way that you have this generational trauma, again, of domestic violence. You're going to have that generational trauma, that substance abuse trauma, that sexual trauma cycling through generations in a family. If you take a very broken, drug addicted or previously exploited mother, and she's trying her best, she's trying to raise her child the only way that she knows how, not saying that makes it okay, but the only way that she knows how, then her child is growing up seeing her mother maybe in a cycle of exploitation, in a cycle of drug abuse, you know, and then along comes this Romeo who's going to tell this girl everything she's ever wanted to hear, and she feels loved, she feels valued for the first time maybe ever in her life. She's coming out of these generations of trauma, and then once he switches it and he becomes someone very controlling and manipulative, how do you unlearn a lifetime of the only thing you've ever known? It, there has to be something that inspires you to think maybe there's another way, maybe there's something I'm missing, maybe there's another path. But it's getting through to that mindset and giving them that inspiration or that hope, because when you grow up around something and it's all it's comfortable. It's more comfortable. I mean, think about how many children in foster care, if you do place them in a loving home, it's like sticking a cold foot in scalding hot water because they've never experienced it before. So it feels dangerous because it's not their comfort zone, right? So you've got to think
Right.
a lot in the same way when you're talking about the psychology behind what's going on.
And so now tell us about Fair Girls. How do you guys help these women um, get through this? I'm so I get so emotional the more I talk about this topic, only because it only shows how much there's a lack of self love within a whole bunch of women, not even just in the United States, but global. But not even that, Tiffany, the damn trauma and the trauma that repeats itself to the point where you have $1 billion industry of young teens, women, and young men, right?
Yeah.
Trafficking themselves only because they don't know who they are. How do you get out of that cycle? How do they get to fair girls where they have the opportunity to turn it around and find out who they are?
I mean, I will say that the women and the youth that we work with, they come to us through a variety of channels. It could be that someone who loves them and does care about them may send a referral our way or may give us a call. It could be that that one, law enforcement officer who was going to arrest for prostitution decided instead to give a referral and to send a young woman our way for some help. It could be that we had a young woman who tuned into a random Wednesday webinar that was being put on by our outreach and prevention specialist. And it was the first time she connected the dots that she was a survivor of exploitation. And then she reached out to us herself and just said, hey, how do I get out of this situation? What do I do? And as a result, she's now doing really well in a program and a placement. And so they really do it just comes from word of mouth, from referrals, from someone who has compassion, right, and empathy, instead of just making that instant judgment call of, oh, this is just a throwaway, this is just a runaway youth, this is just another girl out working the streets, but can actually see kind of beyond that and see that, hey, there's this person behind and underneath this trauma, behind and underneath this circumstance. Let's give somebody a helping hand for a change, and it's a process. When you talk about them coming to Fair Girls and becoming part of the program, it's really a holistic approach in that we do have the Vita home, and the Vita home is where women who are between 18 to 26, and I say 26 loosely, we will bend that some depending if it's a good fit for the house at the time,
Right.
but we have these women and they will live in this house, and it's a safe space for them to live where they know what to expect. There's no more surprises. It's predictable. It's safe. We have groups that they attend on a plethora of topics, whether that's let's do some art therapy today, or let's talk about budgeting and finances, or let's talk about healthy eating and how that impacts our spirit and our mind. They have a case manager who will work with them to help them get their ID again, get a new copy of their birth certificate, who will help them apply for a job, who will help them find a long-term placement and kind of find their way through that. We make sure to connect them with mental health resources and therapy and counseling so that they're not trying to dig through all of this trauma by themselves.
Right.
And so it really takes looking at it as a whole person, right? There's no one perfect path, but if you honor that individual's experience and give them something safe and provide resources, it's amazing. These women are so resilient. I mean, they have backbones of steel
Hmm. I
to
can
come out
imagine.
the other side.
Hmm. I can imagine being out there. You encounter so much, just being on the street. You have to be,
Yeah.
you have to be resilient. How many successful cases you have? Because do they run back to what they know, or do they really try to live this life? Because, you know, if, like you said earlier, if I grew up and this is all I know, that's where I feel comfortable. This life of paying bills and, you know, staying straight and getting a job, seems hard.
It's not a linear process. I think that's the most important thing to remember is that they may come to us and 2 months later decide, you know what, I miss him. Or, you know what, this just isn't doing it for me. This isn't what I thought it would be. And maybe they do go back. But what has happened in that 2 months is that a seed has been planted, a seed that there's another way, right? A seed that they have value, that they matter to somebody, and that there is a person somewhere that is trustworthy. And so I can't tell you how many times that when we have had a case where maybe a youth runs away again or a woman, disappears into the wind again, a year later, the case manager gets a call because she's ready to come back into services. She's ready now. She's realized that, you know what? I thought that I didn't want to do it the hard way and grow and change, but now I'm ready because y'all done planted a seed
Yeah.
that I can't get out of my head. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's not linear, and there is some of that back and forth, but I would say there's a lot of success stories too. Or none of us who work in this would still be going. Like
Right.
those success stories are the stories we hang our hat on, that
Mhm.
we come home and we feel just so fulfilled by. And we have those too. We had a young woman that was staying in our Vita home who is just moved into a college dorm and is gonna be going to
I
college, and
know
like
that's right.
the first person in her family to do it.
Wow.
And the amount of like I almost started crying, and I'm
Yeah.
not a crier, but
Yeah.
I was like ready to sob because we saw this girl when she was at her lowest.
Right.
So we really hang our hat on those stories because those are, you know, the women who show why we do it. So we know it's not linear. We know it's a struggle. We know it's going to break our hearts. But at the same time, when she finally is ready, we're still here. Like once
Right.
you're a fair girl, you're always a fair girl.
Oh man, and that's why, when they brought me to organization, I said I had to interview you guys because I just love the fact that you guys are out there helping these women because again, you know, they're lost in the beginning and really don't have no identity, don't know who they are, and really being taken advantage of. And these predators know that and doing that. But my last question for you is law enforcement. Are they really educated about how to spot these predators and to really help these women? I read an article before I did the interview that a lot of the beer companies are training their truckers when they're on the road to spot human trafficking so that they can help to try to combat the issue too. Is it now uh, coming to the forefront where everyone is getting involved in it, or is it still kind of like a hush hush thing? Because it's big here in Atlanta, but nobody really wants to talk about it. It's something that you just know little things about. Don't go near a white truck. Make sure you watch your surroundings and things like that. Is it out there where it's getting noticed?
You know, that's a tough question to answer,
Uh-oh.
truthfully. Well, because here's the thing is that I think the conversation around trafficking has increased. I mean, we see it with all the documentaries on Netflix, we see it with the conspiracy theories that cause the trafficking hotline numbers to ring off the hook as if we didn't get the memo about the conspiracy theory going around.
Right.
There's a lot of conversation. And so some of that conversation is really helpful and really good and useful in building awareness. And some of that conversation really isn't because, all due respect, I love Liam Neeson as an actor, but Taken is not what we're looking at here in the United States. And it's very misrepresentative of a lot of women's experiences who are survivors of this. So I feel as if it's a double edged sword. And truthfully, that's kind of a similar position to what we're in, I think, right now with law enforcement as well. In
Mm,
that we have some really great law enforcement partners who are really trying to learn and to grow and to handle things a better way. Passing the Safe Harbor Act for DC, that was a big win.
right,
To have it where we can divert these youth into services and into a trauma informed court. But on the other hand, I think, there is still a lot of that tension of law enforcement could stand to learn even more, right? And
right,
so, just like you have people who are very well educated and very people who are very ignorant in any
mhm,
profession, I think that's very true with law enforcement as well. And
right,
so I'm happy that we're partnering with them. I'm happy that we have that doorway to go in and train their new recruits in academy, because that's one of the great things we get to do is go in and teach human trafficking 101 to new recruits.
right,
Could that stand to grow and encompass more police departments? Could that stand to be an ongoing training that isn't just for new recruits? And how do you begin to change the minds of officers who have maybe been officers for an extremely long time and have very preconceived ideas? And so it's that same double-edged sword, right? We need that partnership if we want things to get better, right?
right.
But we also have that struggle.
And so instead of putting the young lady in jail or doing all these things, you want to be able to have that intervention in the beginning to ask this young lady questions to see if she's being trafficked, right?
Right.
Because she might not deserve jail. She might need to be able to get away from her predator.
And she may not even self identify yet as being exploited. She may not have even realized that dynamic for herself yet.
Mm, wow. Wow. I just, so for us women who we've been talking about this all month, what can we do? Like, what things can we look out for? I mean, I, I'm around young ladies all the time and, talking with them and laughing with them. I have no clue on what the signs are or what to look for when we're out as women, going to the grocery store, living our normal lives. Can we pay attention to something or see something if we do see it? Like, how do we as regular people help?
I think the important thing, if you're trying to stay aware for other people around you, definitely pay attention to the power and control dynamic, right? Pay attention to, is this woman able to speak for herself, or is someone speaking for her? You know, is this human being making eye contact with me, or is she staring at the floor?
Mm,
Those things that would signify submission, I
mhm.
think, are definitely something to pay attention to. Paying attention to whether or not she has a voice. Because I don't know about you, but a lot of women who have a voice are going to use it.
Oh yeah, be
you
playing
know,
hard, like
so
yeah.
there's a thing to pay attention to is whether or not, and I think especially right now with the COVID situation and masks being on, is it's really paying attention to that dynamic of power and control. Is this individual that is with her standing in front of her? Is he obscuring my view of her? Is she afraid to look me in the eye? Just paying attention to those little things can make a huge difference. We're
Wow.
so,
Self-absorbed. Yeah, we are. We
let me take a selfie, and then we
are.
completely miss what's happening around us.
Absolutely. So tell us how we can follow Fair Girls, how we can donate, what you guys coming up, how can all of the women in the I'm Loving Me project who we have over 10,000 women on our Facebook. Let us know what can we do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited because this upcoming Friday, the 22nd, is our first annual Truth Conference, which is amazing. It's going to be tools and resources to understanding human trafficking. It's a whole day event, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Registration is $25. You can, you know, go to our website and it'll link you straight to it. But even beyond that conference, we do have these weekly webinars that we will do on Wednesday evenings. If you're wanting to volunteer, we can always use more hands on deck, and filling out that volunteer application through the website. If you have questions, feel free to contact me, tcardy at fairgirls.org. But I would definitely say if you feel led to donate, because obviously everything that we do requires funding. But even if it's a donation of time, that matters too. So you may have a skill set that you don't think is useful, like data collection, but we may need someone to do data collection for a conference. So whatever your skill set, whatever your gifting is, we would love to have it on our side and on our team.
Wow. Tiffany, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for coming, educating us. We will get the word out about your conference. And you can expect a donation from the I'm Living Me project. We're definitely going to donate because this is something that I think we need to pay attention to more. Like we help women, you know, and give them resources to love themselves and to self heal. But to know that there's like this big gap of women where we can step in and help, that's why we always tell the women in our group that's the reason why you got to heal because there's somebody that's behind you that's waiting on you,
That's watching.
that is
They're watching what
watching
you do. Yeah.
to come and help her,
Hmm.
you know? So thank you so much for being here. And thank you for all the information. Do you guys have a Facebook or Instagram or anything that we can follow?
We're on both Facebook and LinkedIn for our social media accounts, in addition to our website. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And you have a good night. Okay.
Thank you for having me. It's been nice talking to you.
Absolutely. All right. Bye.
Bye.